Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's Beyond the Tech podcast. I'm Neda Maria Kaisumi, your host, and today's guest is someone who has built a dynamic and forward-thinking career at the intersection of cybersecurity, technology, and artificial intelligence. Mr. Ralph Hogaboom is a seasoned professional whose journey spans hands-on technical work, strategic leadership, and a deep commitment to protecting systems in an increasingly complex digital landscape. With a background that bridges both the private and public sectors, Mr. Ralph has worked on high-impact projects that not only reflect his technical expertise, but also his passion for innovation and continuous learning. He's known for bringing a thoughtful, human-centered approach to cybersecurity, emphasizing not just the tools and tactics, but people and principles behind them. We're excited to dive into his path, his insights, and the ideas that keeps him motivated in this ever-changing field. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ralph Hogaboom.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Can you take us back to the beginning? What first sparked your interest in the technology?
Probably the early 90s, I was in a punk band in Olympia, Washington. And I don't know if you were familiar with North American music trends at that time, but everybody had to have a MySpace page. And MySpace was one of those sites that let you do an awful lot of like CSS editing. You could put you could tweak and customize your page. And band pages on MySpace were so much fun. It was such an era of creativity. So I had done a little bit of tweaking and tinkering on MySpace, and finally decided, look, we have this new CD that we've recorded. We're hand pressing our CDs and selling them at shows. We need a website. We need a mailing list. It's time to get serious. I asked a friend of mine if he could help because I knew he was kind of into computers, and he said, "Yeah, come on over on Saturday." So I went over to his house, and there was a box of computer parts there, and he dumped it out, and he said, "Here's the case you're going to use. Let's pick out a main board for you." And he didn't touch any of those parts, Nita. He just sat back and told me what to grab. He said, "Okay, now grab that. Which one do you think is going to be the video card?" And I said, I don't know. And he said, "Well, take a guess." And he's like, "Nope, wrong. That's a sound card. You need to find the video card." And so he basically forced me on that Saturday to build my own computer out of his spare parts. I was frustrated at first, but then, it's a problem-solving experience, right? He gives you a puzzle, and I wanted to succeed. I wanted to complete it. Anyway, over the next couple of weeks, he not only taught me how to actually build web pages, right? We're talking about HTML in Notepad, and then taught me how to FTP it up to a website, but also how to do some of the debugging stuff. He taught me how to use MS Paint and Photoshop to slice up images and make an image map. Getting hands-on with the nuts and bolts of here's some code, here's some text, here's the technologies that move these files around, and the end result is something that has color and movement and feeling and can connect to people while also being related to what I wanted to do with my punk rock band. Oh man, I was just... Have you ever done any website building? Have you ever done HTML coding by hand?
Yeah, a couple of them.
Yeah. So, from Notepad, from the pure, not the WYSIWYG editors we have today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember that feeling from getting your first HTML page, up and running?
After overcoming all those codings, it feels, wow, I made the word.
Yeah. Right. It was one of those things where you sit back and you does everybody see this? Look what I've created. I did this. It's so cool. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that was that feeling. It was that combination of music and technology and connecting with people.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And we all have kind of those friends that have pushed us to one way or another. And I'm happy that you ended up this way. Well, tell us a little bit about your experience, how you moved and shifted to cybersecurity. Where was your experience push into that kind of direction?
Yeah. Well, it would be shortly, right about in the same time, right? So in, I think it was around 1996. 1997, because of that punk rock band, I had been living in Tacoma, just south of Seattle, with a guy who ran a music review website. And that was his job. I couldn't believe that. He had his own website. He would review music, and he sold ads, and he made enough money to live. Like, he supported himself. And I didn't realize that could be a career. I didn't realize that combination of stuff could support you. It still didn't quite click for me, right? He had a DSL connection in our apartment for, this was the first high-speed internet I had ever seen. I was blown away by how fast 1.5 megabits was, right? It was amazing. Web pages load in seconds. And we would just take turns sharing the cable. I would say, hey, I want to get online. I would take the cable from his computer, plug it into mine, and I could get online and do stuff. And he had also, right around the same time, started playing Doom. Do you play video games, Nita? Not a gamer?
No, I'm not a gamer.
Well, I wasn't either until I saw this video game on his computer, and I thought, oh my God, that game looks so great, and I want to play it with him. I want to play against him. This seems like we can play together. Let's figure out how to do it. And so I started researching, what does it take to network your computers together? And invested in a switch, or actually I think it was a hub at the time, and a router. And set up, it was very similar to the HTML page. When I think it was like a Saturday night at like 2 a.m. or something, I finally got it up and running. We both had DSL. The first thing we did was opened up Doom and started playing against each other. And we probably, like, for the next several weeks, all we did was played multiplayer games across our LAN network. He probably didn't get any work done. It was amazing. And at that point, I thought, okay, well, if he can run a website doing music reviews, I can do something with networks. Like, I'm really, really interested in this. Shortly after that, I started working for a home automation company in South Seattle doing phone tech support. And so your question was, how did I get involved in technology and cybersecurity?
Cybersecurity, exactly.
Yeah. So from there, it jumped to doing tech support for a company in South Seattle, home automation company. And then I did help desk for a paper mill in in Port Townsend. Sort of a big shift, right? South Seattle technology company to a paper mill out in a rural area. And I think it was about that time that I decided I don't ever want to go back to a big city. There's got to be technology jobs out in rural areas, and that's going to be my focus. So doing tech support or help desk work for a paper mill in a rural Northwest Washington town, and then system administrator for a rural community college, small community college, and then finally back to the Washington State Department of Natural Resources as their chief information security officer.
Interesting. And you almost answered the next question I had about your professional career. But you're living actually in the capital of technology, together with Microsoft campus in Seattle. How the environment there has impacted you professionally? Like, I assume that neighbors or people around you also are involved in tech in Seattle. Not everybody, obviously, but at least some. So how that impact your professional career?
Seattle is about a 2-hour drive away from me, and I have really intentionally chose to live outside of the city, outside of metropolitan areas. I make it up to Seattle, to Microsoft's campus for events like B-Side Seattle, where I met you, which was fantastic, great experience. But I very intentionally don't live in Seattle, and I don't go to Seattle. It's a fine city. It's just not for me. I would say my experience has been influenced by seeing people, specifically in rural areas, who struggle, and people who struggle with technology, whether it's people who can't use a public service website to pay their water bill, and so they go to City Hall and they write a check and they put it in an envelope and they slip it in the slot, or whether it's people standing in line for free cell phones because they're unhoused downtown. I mean, the rural area I live in is economically challenged. We are the second poorest county in the state of Washington. King County is absolutely the wealthiest county in Washington State, and I very intentionally don't live there. So I guess the way that it's influenced me is by seeing that there are people that are being left out of the digital divide, and those are real people with real problems and real needs, and my interest goes there rather than towards the opportunity and the success that might be happening in King County, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And I'm always like yourself in the humanitarian side as well. I enjoy, ministering to different type of people, especially those who are in need. So I absolutely understand it. Well, appreciate it. But my next question is that was there a particular moment or turning point that shifted your focus more heavily into security?
Yeah, I think it was probably around 2015, 2016. I had been working for a community college, a junior college, in higher education, but just that 2-year college experience, which is, in a sense, a second-class citizen in higher ed, right? Community colleges have a fraction of the budget that a university does. They have all the same requirements when you're talking about FERPA compliance, when you're talking about GLBA compliance, some of those requirements around protecting student data, but no dedicated cybersecurity staff. It's just out of the question. And so it becomes yet another hat that you wear. Around that time period, the Washington State compliance requirements for everybody who's a state employee, of which community colleges count, they're state employees as well. We had such a hard time figuring out what is this compliance requirement about? I don't understand it. We don't have the background. We don't have people with the time to look into it. And so the state of Washington, those junior colleges, put together a committee, a voluntary committee. Hey, let's start working through this. And I thought, sure, I'll be the representative from my college. I went to the first couple of meetings and I thought, I either need to quit or I need to take over because they're not getting anything done. They're just sitting around talking about how there's a big problem. And I didn't quit, so I ran for chair. I ended up being their chair for two terms, and just started bossing people around. Basically, I started saying, okay, well, we need a committee to break down access control. We need a committee to break down this, authentication component. Let's build some subcommittees, and I'm going to pick a chair, and you're responsible to get back to us in 2 months with some findings. And here's the findings you need. So I just started assigning homework, and we did start to make progress in that group. And along the way, we started to have a lot of fun. Right? It was great to get to know people and to be at the starting point of the formation of a security community among these junior colleges who, despite the fact that we had vastly different sizes, my college had 1,400 full-time enrolled, or FTE, students. Bellevue Community College had over 25,000. So vastly different scale in terms of the number of students, and at the same time, we had the same problems. So getting involved in that, I thought, oh my God, this sounds absolutely fantastic. I need to look more into cybersecurity. This is, it's like a whole new world with to explore and new things to see and do.
Very interesting. And without knowing you so much, the way just I summarize right now, I think you're very much committed and engaged in whatever you do, and you're persistent to make sure that it happens. And that's type of personality that I do have as well. I totally get it. What skills or mindset help you this transition across roles and industries with tech?
I think you and I we've been talking about sort of people first mentality. There is an exercise that I like to do where I think, okay, well, this customer or this other business unit is telling me that they have a problem. But for just a few seconds, I'm going to try to pretend I'm that person. I'm going to role play that person and try to figure out what does the problem look like from their end. And I'm going to put myself in their shoes and say, well, what is it they need? What is it they want? What barriers are they running into? And my understanding is this is a type of empathy, right? Trying to feel what another person is feeling, and trying to know, actually, internally know what it feels like from their point of view, rather than a description of a problem. What I generally find is that most of the time my assumptions are fairly accurate. This is no replacement for, a psychological evaluation and a thorough inventory of somebody. So I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about trying to, with the tools I have and the information I have available, try to guess where somebody is coming from. That exercise around thinking about the other person, around practicing that empathy for that other person, has served me really well, regardless of whether I'm working in higher ed or working with the wildland fire teams at the Department of Natural Resources. Trying to think about the other person and center the other person, and then to think, okay, how can I remove barriers to them getting things done? How can we as people solve hard problems together? That concept, that mindset, totally separate from technology, whether it's cybersecurity stuff, threat intelligence, or whether we're talking about using generative AI or machine learning, totally separate from the technology. Centering on the people and trying to understand where they're coming from has served me well, regardless of the industry or the environment in which I find myself.
And that's absolutely a right sense of skills and mindset, because this is a structured way of thinking about setting the ISO standard and setting an organization. You have the end users in mind, and that's absolutely a key to success. Can you share a project or initiative where you saw technology, especially AI, truly evolve your career?
Well, I mean, generative AI has had an effect on absolutely everyone, right? You can't avoid it. It's huge. I think it was 2023 where it really first started blowing up, right? When did you first notice generative AI was going to be like, holy smokes, this thing's going to be big?
To me, it was 2020 when I was studying in Harvard.
Okay. And I mean, what were you seeing that early where you knew that something was coming?
Well, we were told that what is coming, and I was just so excited to get in use. I was kind of fantasized a lot on what is upcoming, and we were shown some use cases, which I thought it's going to be amazing. But it was a bit different when I started actually using it, because then it becomes tangible to you, and then you get a different perception of what you actually fantasize for a while.
Right. Once you get your hands on the technology, you understand a little bit more how it can fit into things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was 2023, and people at the state kept saying, "Hey, this is going to be a problem. Also, we really want to use it." And very similar to that higher ed example that I had, I kept waiting for somebody to do something about it, and nobody would. And I said, all right, fine. I either need to quit hearing about this, or I need to get in there and start doing something. So I joined our statewide AI steering committee. I started studying pretty intensely on my own. What is this technology at a root level, right? What is a large language model? What does that mean? What's happening under the curtain? What's happening under the covers? And then started saying, okay, well, how are people applying this? What problems are they running into? And I started collecting use case scenarios for the defects, for when it goes sideways, when it's not working. Because my job is to enable people to do cool stuff, and I'm not worried about it when it works. I'm worried about the problems they might run into, because I want to take those problems away. I want to fix those problems before they happen, so that people can keep on doing the good stuff. And are you familiar with enterprise risk management or doing risk assessments?
Absolutely. That has been part of my job for quite a few years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's a way that you can zoom way out, and you're looking at an enterprise risk management, but you can take some of those concepts and you can apply them at a much smaller scale. I mean, one of my have you ever heard the phrase, the question around ERM, why does a car have brakes? Mm-hmm. So the car can go fast, right? Yeah. Because if you didn't have brakes, you're going to be going 2 miles an hour. that's how I view my role in helping people use generative AI. I don't want to be the person that says no. I want to be the person who builds tools so that we can stop it if it gets scary and we can pull back so that they can go fast. So I joined the AI community of practice, got really involved, began self-educating. I joined the steering committee for artificial intelligence in the state of Washington. I was asked to join as a strategic advisor to Central Washington University's strategic AI program. Started collaborating with some of the people from UC Berkeley in their long-term cybersecurity and their policy and governance area, talking about some of the use cases that we had at DNR and some of the ways that's affecting people that are delivering services to residents in the state of Washington. I joined a committee that started building the policy, the AI policy for the state of Washington as well. And happy to say that I was able to contribute probably about a quarter of that policy is text that I brought in saying, have we thought about this? Can we do this? So just getting really involved, I guess, in the governance side of it. Of course, that winds its way down through, I just finished recording a 25-minute series of video training specifically for Washington state employees around generative AI, right? That covers ethical risks. It covers a basic awareness. It covers how do you know what you're doing with data categorization, data sensitivity? How do I know when I'm sending confidential data through the system? So going back to your question of how has that changed my career, one of the things about generative AI is I have found that it touches everyone across the organization. So it's given me a chance to, right? Yeah, you see it too. It's given me a chance to talk to people who are firefighters, who I'll be talking to somebody and he said, yeah, I was on a 26-hour fire incident out there fighting wildland fire. And my job is to take the radio call logs from that incident and convert it into a narrative and file that with the federal government. I have to file a narrative based on my logs. I have to do that after being on a fire call for 26 hours straight. I trained it on my last logs and my last narrative. I trained ChatGPT to use my current logs, and I said, give me a narrative based on these logs and the style of my last one. What could have been 2 hours of really, really painful writing when all you want to do is sleep, he turned it into 15 minutes, edited it, submitted it. I get to talk to people like that all the way up to our executive staff and say, you know, here's where we're seeing generative AI. What can we do to take away the bad stuff and make the good stuff work? So in terms of a career turn, generative AI gives me the opportunity to speak to so many more people than I otherwise would have and find out how it's impacting our business in all of these really, really interesting ways.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And obviously, you are a curious person, which I would like very much. And I would like to know what keeps you excited about learning in this rapidly evolving field.
I would say one of the things, there's a couple that I would answer with, but I guess what I would pick here is I really appreciate the things I see coming out of open source, open source software, open source technology. The open source community is a community of people solving problems for other people, right? So whether that's running Linux on the desktop or messing around with GPT for all. Are you familiar with GPT for all?
And no, not that one.
It's a graphical user interface, and it lets you download offline models. So you can download versions of DeepSeek, you can download Ollama, you can download all sorts of locally running LLMs for generative AI right there in your browser, and you can train it on your local documents. So feed it PDFs. One of the things I did, I think in late 2023, maybe 2024, on a Linux computer, I fired up GPT for all, and then I wrote a script in Python using Beautiful Soup. I don't know if you've ever used Beautiful Soup. It's a scraping library, and I just pulled down all of the Washington State RCWs as text files, and then I fed that to my GPT for all to an OLAMA model using this local docs functionality. I trained it on the Washington State RCWs. And then I just started asking it questions about personally identifiable information. Can you define this? Can you define a security breach? I built a model running on my desktop so that I didn't have to search the state RCWs anymore to find information about, cybersecurity and privacy and things like that. And boy, that's kind of a dorky thing to do in your free time on the weekend, right? But that kind of stuff keeps me excited, keeps me interested. I'll give you a second example. My daughter and my son have both moved out recently and gone to college in opposite directions. They're at universities now. And we have two problems together. One, they're often working on campus and off campus, and they don't have a USB key for their files. So they wanted to sign up for Dropbox or Box.com or OneDrive or something. The second thing is we do video calls every week, and Zoom has that 40-minute limit, and they don't want to participate with Zoom. They don't want to participate with a corporate-owned video. Anyway, so I spun up a Docker container with Nextcloud using Traefik for web proxy. Fed it a Docker container for like a Redis backend and some like a Postgres backend, and a Let's Encrypt certificate. I spun up a Nextcloud instance, fed Nextcloud Talk in there, so we have free video, audio, chat with no time limits, high quality, and they have file access they can get to from mobile phones on this privately run, self-hosted file storage and video chat platform. And it's all open source software. It's just, running it in these Docker containers. That stuff is so fun, Nita. Like spending a Saturday and a Sunday, spinning up just writing the perfect Docker Compose file, and you start it and everything runs and it pulls in and the website is live within 5 minutes, and I can't tell you how much I enjoy the satisfaction of getting that to run and knowing that it's serving my kids away at college. That's the kind of stuff that I say keeps me curious.
It's extremely fascinating. Are there any current innovation or tools in cybersecurity that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, I think it goes back to enterprise risk management. I'm an amateur student in ERM. I don't have any formal training, so things by like Alex Sidorenko, a European risk manager. I think he was 2022 Europe's Risk Manager of the Year. He also runs Risk Awareness Week. Just a ton of really, really useful videos and supplementary information talking about how to measure anything in cybersecurity risk by Hubbard is an excellent book. Sam Savage's The Flaw of Averages. Reading some of these books about quantitative risk management, and then seeing it play out in some of these webinars by people that are doing risk management, like Alex Sidorenko. I think that is an innovation in cybersecurity, at least in North America. It sounds like Europe is ahead of us, ahead of North America quite a bit in terms of quantitative risk management. I think the United States, in particular government, is really stuck in qualitative risk management. We have heat maps, we have risk registers, and we have low, medium, and high. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by not quantifying our risk in the way our European friends are. One particular piece of that I find really interesting. Are you familiar with like utility theory as a tool to compare unlike risks?
And no.
This is a concept I just heard about last week again from Alex Sidorenko. He has a short video where he was talking about that. Utility theory from economics, where you assign a value of expected utility from something, right? Whether it's a stock investment, your expected utility is a blue chip stock. You're going to get a small growth, but the expected utility is that it's stable. Versus a tech startup, your expected utility is you might get a bunch of money out of it and you might lose it all because it's more volatile, right? So you weight your investment based on your expected utility. If you apply that same expected utility, then when we're talking about a branch office, what's the risk of that branch office getting hit with ransomware? That's one risk. What's the risk of that branch office getting shut down because there's a wildland fire in the area and it's too dangerous and that area gets evacuated. The expected utility measured in people hours and expected in what they can do for the agency, those are two separate risks. But if we use expected utility theory, we can compare them, we can measure them, we can quantify them based on what we think we're going to get out of it and what we think might happen. That's an innovation that's really easy to grasp. It's accessible to model it in Excel and to get some quantifiable numbers that I can use and I can give to management, and I can support decision making at my agency. I can affect real world things that we're doing by looking at it from that risk management point of view and using some of these tools like utility theory that I hear about in the risk management landscape. And again, as an amateur, as an enthusiast about risk management, I already find it incredibly useful.
Interesting. I never have heard about this, but I found it very interesting. Thank you for sharing that insight. And from your perspective, how aware are most people and businesses about cybersecurity risk today, especially in the area that you are living?
I think people have an intuitive understanding that there's risk involved. It's sort of like when somebody buys a new car. They know they have this valuable thing that they like, and so sometimes they park at the far end of the parking lot when they go to the grocery store. They don't want anybody else parking near them. They're not sitting down and doing a formal risk assessment, right? What's the risk of my car going to get scratched or a cart gets bumped into the outside or something like that? They're intuitively understanding that there's this thing that they value and they want to protect it and sustain it. And I think the same thing is true about cybersecurity. I think people understand when they're dealing with a system that has other people's information or financial information or the ability to do something tremendous for their job, that system then has a risk and has a need to be protected. I think the part that people don't understand is the sophistication of the criminal supply chain, right? When you tell somebody, look, I know phishing is not exciting. We've all been sort of beaten over the head with phishing awareness education. Don't click on links, don't click on links. But if you sit someone down and you say, did you know that right now you can buy 100 aged Gmail accounts for a couple of bucks on the dark web? How much do you think a government account, an account ending in .gov, sells for? Because there is a price. You can buy it on the dark web. And there's a reason why that people just collect those accounts and sell them. And that dollar amount outside the US can go a lot farther than it does inside the US. And they sell that to somebody else who then takes that, bundles it up, and weaponizes this. There's a whole supply chain that starts with getting your credentials and ends up with reputational damage or financial damage or system outage. So talking about and showing screenshots from the dark web or from wherever of that criminal supply chain and the sophistication of it gets people's minds out of thinking, oh, it's just some teenager goofing around in his parents' basement, to realizing that there are sophisticated adversaries who are actively targeting us, not specifically because us, but actively targeting everyone, and that there is something at stake. It jolts them back into that idea of, I am driving a new car and I need to park at the far end of the parking lot. Gosh, does that answer your question? I think my metaphor maybe wandered a bit.
You mentioned a very important point, that how naive can people be in considering the cybersecurity attack. And on that note, I would like to have a follow-up question: that what common misconception do you think that people have about cybersecurity?
That it's a technology problem. I mean, I've heard people say our most important asset is the human firewall, right? I do believe that. I think people can be your strongest link and your weakest link, but to tie that in with risk a little bit, the systems that I care about are ones that have utility or outcomes for human beings. If we've got a system in place and it doesn't affect people, there's zero risk because I don't care what happens to it. It's systems where people are involved. And the biggest misconception is that cybersecurity is a technology problem, and it's not. It's a people problem. It's an organizational change problem. It's a maturity problem for the organization. Yeah, I really believe that.
Absolutely. And I totally agree. I hope that this conversation raise more awareness among people. That's actually my hope. And you have a very curious, innovative personality. And I can't wait to ask my next question, which is my favorite question in all these shows. That if you had unlimited time and resources, what kind of tech project or innovation would you want to explore?
Are you a gardener? Do you do any gardening?
Now and then, yes. We do
Yeah.
have a garden, and I do sometimes some gardening.
I think I would want to do something that combined like community gardening with housing, with affordable housing. We have a community garden here in town, and starting in January, I've been volunteering every weekend working at this community garden. And the community garden is in the projects, so it's in our low income housing area. And there is something magical about working with dirt. I don't know what it is. I did stumble across a study that said like endorphins in your brain when you're working with dirt, and when you're smelling the dirt, you're turning dirt, you're planting things, you're out in green things, that there are beneficial, like your brain responds very beneficially in ways that are scientifically measurable when that happens. You're more optimistic, you have more energy, you're more likely to impact your community in positive ways. I love that we have a community garden in one of our low income housing areas. The whole concept of food sovereignty, specifically in the United States, I think, where we're so dependent on imported, like large scale farming. I think that's an area that's very human centric. It may not seem like an area for technology, but I would love to go so much deeper into some sort of a project that combines affordable housing or low income housing with community gardening, community garden spaces, shared spaces that bring people together around a system that has that sustainable governance. Finding a model that works where it could have a more positive impact on our community, and really try to grow that and see how big and how useful it could be made.
Very interesting, and I'm sure that will help a lot mentally and psychologically. I think that's what we say in Norway, that you have to go to nature, so gardening will be part of it. And I would like to ask one question that this is kind of personal to me and my colleagues. A couple of my Harvard colleagues and I, we are prototyping a model to use data to reduce the school shooting. Because every time that there is a school shooting in US, it really hurts my soul. And that's why I actually initiated this kind of project. So what do you think? How can we use AI to reduce the school shooting? Or do you have any advice for our prototype and team?
I feel undereducated about specifically United States gun violence. I'm not a gun owner. I don't know of anyone who is a gun owner, and so I think in some sense I've self-selected out of the culture of gun violence in my country. But as somebody looking at it from the outside, it seems like a people problem. It seems like an organizational change problem, where the United States doesn't have a shortage of role models to look at. Australia, right? Wasn't it around 25 years ago that they banned most guns, and as a result, their gun violence dropped significantly? They don't have that problem anymore. The United States is the area that, because of our policies, because of our governance, we continue to have a growth in gun violence. It's not because we don't know how to get there. It's because we're unwilling or unable to do the organizational change to make that happen. I suspect that AI modeling, machine learning, applied towards organizational change, right? Doing Monte Carlo simulations, or trying to figure out, build a model of the United States thought process around this. And what is the combination of news events and political appetites and tolerances, and politicians and bills that would result in in a sustainable move towards reduction in gun ownership, gun use, that would lead to gun violence. I suspect that artificial intelligence, specifically the machine learning part and simulations, right, would probably be the biggest benefit of technology applied to what is at its heart a people and governance and will problem.
Absolutely. And what we are trying to do, just to let you know, we have studied data from 1960s up till last year and identified some pattern that how a person with gun violence can come toward the school area. And we are trying to do the live data monitoring to match the pattern with whatever that is coming up and proactively preclude this incident. So we'll see. We are testing this for now. But thank you for sharing.
So cool. What is the name of the group that you're a part of that's working on this?
Our company is called Bloom Ages.
That is so cool.
Yeah. Great. And finally, what's beyond the tech for you? And what drives you personally behind the professional mission?
I think beyond the tech for me has to do with digital sovereignty. When I think about privacy and who owns the digital footprint, the digital assets we have, I think people running their own instances, whether that's you're hosting your own mail, you're doing your own version of Google Docs, you've moved towards decentralized social media like Mastodon, Lemmy, and Kbin, and away from corporate controlled social media, corporate controlled online services, as well as some of the privacy technology that's out there. Again, self-hosted, things like Pi-hole, where you've got an ad blocker running in a Docker container or on a Raspberry Pi in your house to protect you from that invasive online tracking, to help anonymize some of the decentralized VPN style networks where you connect, you're just a node, whether it's Tor or something else, and are able to browse and interact on the internet with some more privacy than otherwise would be afforded. I think that's beyond the tech. I think that's people reclaiming our own space on the internet outside of corporate or other oversight or control. I get really excited around self-hosting conversations, especially around people who are new to that and are starting to get fired up about it and starting to learn some of the, how do I monitor my dashboard? How do I open up more services? How do I share my music library with my friends online in a way that they can access? That kind of stuff may seem fairly trivial, but it moves the focus of control back to the individual, back to the person, and out of a company that gets to decide what you see, what you do, and who you interact with.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing that. Well, Mr. Hogaboom, this has been an incredibly interesting conversation. At least I learned a lot, and I'm sure our audiences did. Thank you so much for being with us in this show today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nita. I really appreciated it.